uniformity of the membranes of red blood cells. Because if a person is lacking vitamin B12, often there will be large and small red blood cells in a page, and the larger and smaller red blood cells are indicative of having a B12 shortage, which can, of course, lead to pernicious anemia. Vitamin B12 and folic acid go hand in hand to help a person feel better. So in this winnowing process that I mentioned in the very beginning, we have to make sure that the person has their basic low-level vitamins. Number two, one of the reasons why I always carry a centrifuge with me with microcapillary tubes is to check to see in a microcapillary tube, after it has been centrifuged, when the red blood cells are separated from the plasma, that there is a good percentage of the red blood cells still formed. If a person is iron anemic, their hematocrit will be low. So hematocrit in determining this so-called chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia is very, very important to see if their iron is low, and if that is okay, step number two, then in looking at the blood, we see if the red blood cells are all the same size, or if the circumferences of them are large and small. While I'm in this blood, by coincidence, looking at this picture, I just bumped into one of the red blood cells with a little appendage on it, which has one of the parasites that would be similar to the one that we saw wiggling in the plasma a while ago, and this particular red blood cell has a parasite inside it, which again weakens the efficacy of how that red blood cell would actually function.
One thing, Dr. Chambers, on one of our previous videos, we actually broke one of those live blood cells for those that would like to see what actually happens and the parasites inside the cell. Is that possible?
Yes.
It was shocking to me to see when you fractured that cell the number of parasites that came out of one blood cell.
And parasites do exist inside the membrane of the red blood cell, and unfortunately, I'm saying again, lab tests in Western medicine don't necessarily disclose anything about parasites that are in them. And again, this is a very interesting picture because there's a parasite that is looped right here, and I haven't even destroyed these red blood cells. I haven't even broken them open. So out in the plasma, this parasite, if you can see that loop right here, it's wiggling, and it's also feeding on some fungus and yeast, the same as that parasite right here is feeding on fungus and yeast. And it is possible, and I'm just going to take a minute to push down lightly on this cover slide of this particular blood to pop some of the membranes of red blood cells, and it highly disturbs the red blood cells here now. And then I have to go in search of where they are after they are broken. And finally, this gets kind of ugly here because I broke the membranes of the red blood cells, and through here what we would be looking for is anything that looks like some of those same snakes or parasites. And as we search through here, we'll see if we can pick up one or two of the parasites that have actually were hiding in the membrane of a red blood cell, and they'll be out here. And here's one of them right here, and that would have been inside the membrane of a red blood cell. These are pictures of fractured or burst red blood cells, and it shows the parasites that were inside the membranes of the red blood cells, and they're wiggling on here. And in all of the red blood cells that are here, any of them that have popped will always put out anything that was inside it out in the plasma. And there's several features, if the camera can pick them up, showing these little wormy looking things going through here. I think it should be understood when we go through the so-called winnowing process of determining what has caused the fibromyalgia or the chronic fatigue, you have to understand that it could be the lack of iron, it could be the lack of vitamin B12, it could be a stress in a person's life, it could be eating the wrong foods, too many refined carbohydrates, which of course is a food source for parasites and bacteria to live in the system, and even a weakened immune system. if a person has stress in their life, the thyroid is greatly affected from the stress, hypertension, hyperexcitability, and once the thyroid is no longer working, something has to help the body to maintain its homeostasis. So then the adrenal cortex picks up, and when the adrenals are overworked, because it's usually a short-term mechanism as our fight or flight mechanism in the body, and for a short term it will work as fight or flight, but if we're living on the adrenals, then finally we go into adrenal exhaustion. So it's kind of a systematic process. If we're eating too many sugars, too many refined carbohydrates, and if we're also undergoing stress, the thyroid is the first line in succession to go bad, then the adrenals start to go bad, and we fall into adrenal exhaustion, leading to chronic fatigue.